We have a story tonight that has to do with a single photograph. It's a surveillance photo taken in Afghanistan and obtained exclusively by NBC News. It's a photo of a gathering of Taliban fighters, but some say it shows more than that. Some say it shows what was a perfect opportunity to take out the enemy, but the military was unable to take the shot. The question is why? It was NBC News correspondent Kerry Sanders who obtained this photo exclusively. He reports for us tonight from Kabul.
Brian, it took 5 days for the U.S. military to consider my request to declassify the photograph. It's a grainy still image that shows what some here in Afghanistan say was a lost opportunity to inflict serious damage on the Taliban.
Army intelligence officers say the photo shows 190 members of the Taliban at a funeral 2 months ago. The U.S. Army claims among those in the formation, high-ranking members of the Taliban leadership. An unmanned armed predator like this one was spying on the group. Intelligence officers monitoring the scene in real time wanted to fire. They asked permission. The request went to intelligence analysts, senior commanders, and lawyers. But intelligence officers were told no, they were not allowed to fire. Why? U.S. rules of engagement do not permit waging war in a cemetery.
That was frustrating. Those individuals live to fight another day, potentially could cause harm to our soldiers, civilians, the population of government Afghanistan.
Despite frustration, U.S. military leaders here say the decision not to fire was the right one.
Meantime, the Taliban fight by their own rules. On Monday, at a funeral for an Afghan government official, a Taliban bomber blew himself up, killing 6 policemen. Brian?
All right, from Kerry Sanders in Kabul, Afghanistan, we turn to the Pentagon and our correspondent there, Jim Miklashevsky, for more on this. And Jim, let's talk about when U.S. fighters can shoot back these rules of engagement. When and how can they vary, and whose call is it?
Well, actually, there's a little bit of confusion here tonight, Brian. A senior Pentagon official tells us that the rules of engagement did not prevent the commanders on the ground in Afghanistan from launching airstrikes against that grouping of Taliban. Now, these rules are set in place to avoid serious accidents such as killing of innocent civilians or destruction of sensitive religious sites. But there are exceptions. If, in fact, the value of the target outweighs the potential collateral damage, death of civilians, or cultural backlash, then commanders are able to take the shot. You know, it happened very recently in Iraq when airstrikes were ordered and killed Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, the al-Qaeda leader. Commanders on the ground weren't sure exactly that al-Qaeda's leader Zarqawi was in the building, but they took the shot anyway. And officials here tonight think that the commanders in Afghanistan blew the call and they should have taken the shot.
Jim Miklashevsky with an explanation of those rules of engagement.
There's a tremendous amount of controversy over all this, but at the end of the day, do we even know who might have been in that group?
We don't. In fact, that's one of the problems with something like this is you see a group picture like that, it looks like an inviting target. You don't really know who's in it, even though you've got some reports on the ground. And so that's one of the factors that plays into the decision of whether or not to strike a group like this. They really didn't know who was in there.
The military said the picture shows a July gathering of Taliban insurgents that it first considered a tactically viable enemy target.
An unmanned armed predator like this one was spying on the group. Intelligence officers monitoring the scene in real time.
It's a very inviting target, there's no doubt about it, and to destroy that many enemy insurgents at one time without hunting them down by onesies and twosies would be a great achievement. However,
so was it a missed opportunity or a disaster averted?
Well, we don't really know because we don't have all the information if in fact they were Taliban.
The U.S. Army claims among those in the formation, high-ranking members of the Taliban leadership.
Now here's some key things though. If it was a cemetery, you should have a cross-check from GPS coordinates. All of those sites that are not to be fired upon unless fired from are in the system, on the maps. They're in the tactical operations centers. So our cross-check should have been able to be done very quickly. And then on rules of engagement, whether it be a burial party or not, some level of command can make a decision on a exception to the rules of engagement if need be.
Is there any talk tonight now, in the wake of all this, of potentially modifying those rules of engagement, which seem to be subject to multiple interpretations here tonight?
No, the rules of engagement, there's no problem with that according to the military. It's, if there's a problem, it's in the judgment call. And again, the judgment of this commander was to err on the side of not striking, and that's what people are second-guessing now. But again, you have to put himself in their shoes. They got to look at all of the factors involved. And in this case, he just thought it was the wrong call to strike this funeral party given the circumstance.
I remember when I've heard anything this dumb.
But keep in mind, I don't think that the drone was armed anyway, and they would have had to send some type of a strike aircraft or something to take out the target. So we don't know that.
An unmanned armed predator like this one was spying on the group. Intelligence officers monitoring the scene in real time wanted to fire. They asked permission. The request went to intelligence analysts, senior commanders, and lawyers. But intelligence officers were told no. They were not allowed to fire.
The hunt for the leader of al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden. Who dropped the ball? How did he get away? Well, here's a quick look at some ideas of how he got away.
The best U.S. intelligence said this was where the world's most wanted terrorist, Osama bin Laden, was hiding out. Gary Bernstein was the covert CIA operative in charge of Operation Jawbreaker. The name, he says, was given to the hunt for bin Laden in Tora Bora. With his small team, 8 CIA and military operatives, Bernstein watched and waited.
At that point, I would send four men into the mountains. 2 of them were CIA. 2 of them were JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command from the military that had been folded into my team. The 4 of those Americans, with about 10 Afghan guides/guards, would go up into the mountain looking for bin Laden. I sent them on a scouting mission. It was a very, very dangerous thing they did. We knew that he had fallen back with approximately 1,000 people.
He felt it was time to call for airstrikes, but he says it quickly became clear that he was dangerously short of manpower on the ground.
I believed that the Afghans were not reliable enough, and I requested the support of the U.S. military in the form of ground forces. I asked that a battalion of Rangers be sent in, 600 to 800.
The CIA wanted to put soldiers up there. Well, first of all, none of their business. They're not soldiers.
With those forces, we could close, counter, and destroy bin Laden and his forces.
But those forces never showed up.
No, they didn't come. We would receive Delta Force. A 40-man element of Delta Force would come. So you had roughly 60 Americans up there conducting combat operations against bin Laden and his force with the aid of a number of forces from what was called the Eastern Alliance.
When the Battle of Tora Bora ended, Osama bin Laden was gone, most likely using his knowledge of the mountain fortress's complex system of caves and tunnels to make his way into Pakistan.
I believe he crossed into Pakistan on the 15th or 16th of December. It was probably the same day I left the country.
Officially, both the White House and the Pentagon would say the U.S. never knew bin Laden's location with certainty, let alone that he was in Tora Bora.
We have seen repeated speculation about his possible location, but it has obviously not been verifiable. Had it been verifiable, one would have thought that someone might have done something about it.
And they've never acknowledged that granting Bernstein the troops he says he requested might have ended the hunt for Osama bin Laden in the mountains of Tora Bora a little more than 2 months after the September 11th attacks.
It was just unfortunate that we didn't get the ground forces that we had requested. Had they been provided earlier in the month of December when we initially requested them, possibly we could have ended his life.
The goal has never been to get bin Laden. Obviously, that's desirable. It's interesting. I just read a piece by some analysts that said you may not want to go after the top people in these organizations. You may have more effect by going after the middle managers because they're harder to replace.